be giving this webinar to you all. As Tom noted, I'll be talking specifically about the ISSF commitments and verification tools related to traceability, but I'm also going to touch on a couple of other aspects of ISSF's system and how it relates to IUU phishing as well. So first up, for those of you who are not aware of ISSF, or maybe not as aware of ISSF as I might like you to be, ISSF was created and launched in 2009 by scientists, leaders in industry and environmental NGOs to advance the future of tuna fisheries together. The ISSF mission is to undertake and facilitate science-based initiatives for the long-term conservation and sustainable use of global tuna stocks, reducing bycatch and promoting tuna ecosystem health. And we do that through developing and implementing verifiable science-based practices and commitments, and through supporting and cooperating with RFMOs and undertaking vigorous advocacy. ISSF is not an eco-label or a certification body. We do our work around three core strategic pillars. We have a science pillar, which is the part of ISSF that undertakes and advances scientific research. We have an influence pillar, which is the pillar that I'm responsible for, which is our advocacy and outreach pillar and policy-making pillar. And our third pillar is on verification, which is the pillar that encompasses the tools and systems to maintain and enhance credibility through transparency and compliance. And that's the pillar and the tools that I'm going to be talking about today. And these relate to participating company compliance and transparently communicating the results of the audits related to that compliance, and the proactive vessel register. For ISSF, traceability is fundamental to the fight to eliminate IUU fishing and to verify sustainability commitments for tuna fisheries. In fact, it's so fundamental that our traceability conservation measure that I'm going to speak to you about today is the bedrock and the foundation for all of the ISSF conservation measures in our system of verification. And we know that this issue is a shared priority of the GTA membership and the Traceability Declaration signatories. And you can see there that I've noted the goals of the GTA on traceability and the WEF declaration commitments. And it's our view that the ISSF conservation measures and our compliance and audit system can assist and support GTA members and TTD signatories in implementing those commitments on transparency and traceability in your tuna supply chains. So our system for traceability and transparency is really composed of four key elements, and I'm going to touch on each one of these elements briefly in the presentation today. These four elements are interlinked and reinforcing, and they are composed of: one is the ISSF traceability conservation measure and other related conservation measures. The second is the ISSF proactive vessel register. Third, we have the independent auditing of the ISSF participating companies and vessels on the PVR. And finally, you have the public communication, the auditing and the public communication of the results of those audits. So firstly, the ISSF conservation measures. This infographic here on this slide gives you a sense of the depth and breadth of the ISSF conservation measures. We have 27 conservation measures that are associated with 8 different themes. These are science-based conservation measures that are adopted by the ISSF Board of Directors. And ISSF participating companies commit to comply with those conservation measures and agree to an independent audit annually by a third party and have those reports published. So the topic for today is traceability. ISSF has 4 key traceability and data-related conservation measures. The foundation, though, as I noted at the outset, is our Conservation Measure 2.1 on product traceability. This is one of our initial and original conservation measures because it is so fundamental to everything that ISSF does. ISSF participating companies are to credibly trace all tuna products from capture to plate. The traceability procedure must record the name, flag, Universal Vessel Identifier or IMO number, catcher and transshipping vessels, fish species, ocean of capture corresponding to the tuna RFMO area, fishing trip dates, gear employed, date the company took ownership of the fish, and each species by weight. And all of the ISSF conservation measures are audited annually. So the participating companies go through this annual audit by MRAG Americas, which serves as our third-party auditor. We have audit protocols for all of these conservation measures. This is the example of the audit protocol for ISSF Conservation Measure 2.1 on traceability. The protocols detail the requirements, the means of verification, and the frequency of the checks. And all of these audit protocols are available on our website and are published every year for the current year and the 2 years to come. So after these audits have taken place, the companies are provided with a report, and then ISSF publishes 2 annual compliance reports. First, we have an aggregate compliance report, and this slide will show you how over time, when ISSF first began undertaking these audits in 2015, we had about an 80% conformance rate, and then as of March 2020, we have a 99% conformance rate. And all of this continuous improvement over time has taken place when the number of conservation measures has increased and the compliance criteria has become more rigorous. So this is an aggregate compliance report that we publish, and we have much more detail in the report about the different conservation measures and the conformance rates related to each of those conservation measures. But we also publish the individual compliance reports for the participating companies. And you can find those on our website, and I encourage you to look at those and examine the conformance rates for the different conservation measures for particular participating companies of interest. And as I noted, the 2020 individual company reports are available now, as is the aggregate report. So the other element I mentioned at the outset was a ISSF Proactive Vessel Register. The Proactive Vessel Register is a tool that ISSF launched in 2012. It's a public-facing database of individual vessels that have voluntarily chosen to register themselves on this database and to publicly demonstrate their commitment to specific tuna sustainability best practices. And all vessels registered on the Proactive Vessel Register are annually audited, again by MRAG Americas. And they're audited for compliance with specific science-based responsible fishing practices. And any tuna vessel may register. We have long line, pole and line, hand line, and supply and tender vessels. And since its launch in 2012, it's just been growing and growing. And at this point, we have more than 75% of the world's large-scale tuna purse seine vessels listed on the PVR. This gives you an indication of what if you were to go to the PVR database for the purse seine vessels, you'll be able to see very specific information for each one of the vessels that are listed. The name of the vessel, their UVI or IMO number, where they are flagged, where they're authorized to be fishing, and a whole range of other sustainability and best practice commitments. What you can't see on this slide, because it's too far at the other end, is we have a history button, and that history button allows you to see their audits results. So where this particular vessel may have had a red X, meaning they were not compliant with a specific item that is tracked by the PVR, say observer coverage or shark finning policy, you can view that history and see when they were non-compliant and when they became compliant over time. And we have a separate database for each of the gear types. Here's an example of a vessel on the Longline PVR database. I wanted to touch on, during the course of this presentation, two other global initiatives that are related to the topics of traceability and fighting IUU. The first is the FAO Global Record. The FAO has launched this for several years now, and ISSF has been active in supporting the development of this global record. And the FAO's record is designed to list vessels in a whole range of attributes, as well as port entry and inspection and surveillance information and authorizations in order to combat IUU and support the implementation of the Port State Measures Agreement. There is significant alignment between the vessel attribute data collected and verified on the ISSF PVR and the vessel data on the global record. However, there are important areas of difference. The PVR shows vessel level implementation of best practices, and it is independently verified. The global record displays port entry and inspection information, or WIL, as well as fishing authorizations. The PVR allows vessels to register themselves, but the global record only allows flag state provided information. So, companies that are interested in the transparency and implementation of best practices on tuna fishing vessels and support vessels in their supply chain could consider requiring PVR registration and advocate to flag states to register their vessels and support vessels on the global record, because they are complementary initiatives. In addition, as many of you are aware, because you have had webinars about this topic, the Global Dialogue on Seafood Traceability recently launched its 1.0 standards. So we were interested to see how the ISSF conservation measures on traceability and data capture and our verification system benchmarked against the GDST's standards. We asked our independent auditor to do that, to review those standards by the GDST and benchmark it. The independent auditor determined that the ISSF traceability exercise covers all of the baseline key data elements listed in GDST's 1.0 standard that apply to tuna fisheries. They also noted that the compliance audits also require other documentation, including catch certificates and captain statements, transshipment declarations, and so forth. So the conclusion is that the ISSF conservation measures for traceability and data capture, and as well as our annual verification system, meets or exceeds the GDST 1.0 minimum key data elements that apply to tuna fisheries. So we're very pleased with that and have been happy to be supportive of the GDST, but it is also helpful to note that the traceability system that ISSF has had in place for several years meets or exceeds what is being advocated across the industry by the GDST. And I wanted to round out the end of this webinar by underscoring the efforts that ISSF is doing that relates to combating IUU fisheries. I showed you that infographic at the beginning that had all of the different conservation measures that ISSF has adopted. And I thought it's important to note that this traceability conservation measure and the verification system that ISSF has in place underscores and supports all of those measures, and that we have a number that are specifically designed to deter IUU activities. For example, requiring transactions only with vessels that are not on an RFMO IUU list, that are flagged to a relevant RFMO, that are listed on the relevant RFMO's authorized vessel record, registered on the PVR, have an IMO number. For purse seine vessels, large-scale purse seine vessels having 100% observer coverage. And if purse seine vessels, no at-sea transshipment is allowed unless it's specifically authorized, or for long-line vessels, only if those transshipments at sea are observed. So again, while I was focusing on our traceability scheme and our measures during this webinar, I wanted to make sure that it was clear that there are a whole bunch of other conservation measures that are specifically designed to support tuna sustainability and combating IUU that are underpinned by the traceability approach and the verification system. And we're very pleased to have such a broad range of participating companies active in the ISSF system. We have a global engagement across the world with 26 companies representing the whole set of regions. And we are also very pleased that leading companies, buying companies, have incorporated the ISSF conservation measures and/or the proactive vessel register into their public-facing policies because they recognize the importance of these measures and the strength of the PVR. So in summary, ISSF has been very glad to be working in collaboration with the GTA and other partners to advance the sustainability of tuna fisheries through credible, practical, and verifiable initiatives. And we do this to advance our strategic objectives. And our system of conservation measures and verification tools, including the PVR, can support GTA members and TTD signatories in implementing their commitments on transparency and traceability in their supply chains. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Great, thank you very much, Holly. And for those of you who did join us the first time we tried this, I am probably just as relieved as Holly that that went off without a hitch. So fantastic,
Indeed.
brilliant. So if you have any questions, feel free to just chip in with them, or if you'd like to use the chat box, feel free to do that. You can do that privately if you prefer to give an anonymous question. Whilst you're thinking about that, I do have a quick question. Does the PVR have a column or requirement on social and labour issues, Holly?
Well, thanks, Tom. It's a good question. No, at this point it does not. The ISSF strategic plan has directed us to monitor and evaluate the ongoing efforts to establish a standard or a set of standards for social and labor. ISSF does not have expertise in this area, but we are monitoring those NGOs and others that are working on this. And that at that point, once something has emerged as a credible standard, ISSF is going to consider what we may be able to do to support that. But right now we do not have a column on the PVR related to the social and labor issues because we do not have a conservation measure on those issues.
Thank you. Any questions from our audience for Holly or Michael? Oh yes, Chris, do you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick one. What's the next stage, or is there a 3 to 5 year vision about where you think this is going to go?
The ISSF or which piece?
Well, the PVR, I guess, in principle, but also where ISSF thinks its direction of travel is going to be.
Well, with the PVR, it continues to grow. I mean, and we continue to look at ways to strengthen the PVR by adding additional sustainability requirements. And we have a set of sort of benchmarks that we look at. You know, how does it advance tuna sustainability, and how verifiable is it? We need to be able to conduct audits on those activities. So that's really guides how we decide what kinds of things can be added to the PVR. With the ISSF, you know, we are nearing the end of this strategic plan cycle, and so we're beginning to, you know, look ahead to the future. And I think, you know, we are going to be guided by our desire to continue to improve tuna stocks and looking at other ways that ISSF can support these emerging issues in the future.
We have a question on the chat from Michael Griff at WWF US. Holly, can you speak to how ISSF work is related to FIPS?
Oh, sure. Yeah, hi, Michael. Yes, ISSF's work is directly in support of FIPS. I'll go back to the beginning. I went through this section fairly quickly, but you can see here that all of the work that all the focus areas in our strategic pillars are directly related to supporting FIPS. And ISSF has a very dedicated work stream to supporting FIPS. We have a whole segment of our website devoted to technical tools, and we have a resource finder that can be used by FIPS to specifically, like if they have a specific activity or something in their pre-assessment that's something that they need to work on, they can do a search specific to that performance indicator and find tools. We have a set of experts that work directly with FIPS to help support them using ISSF tools or other scientific resources. We are in members of the stakeholder committees and a number of FIPS. And so we also work very actively with WWF and other FIP implementers, as well as Fishery Progress, Key Traceability, and a number of others to help them in their work with FIPS. And we've been very pleased to also have a number of FIPS join us in RFMO advocacy. That's been a really great development in the last couple of years.
Great, thank you very much. Do we have any other questions at all? No. Well, if you do think of any, please feel free to jump in while I'm wrapping up. We've got plenty of time. Oh, well, we do have one. Have you evaluated how supply chain members could combine ISSF tools with upcoming efforts like the Responsible Fishing Vessel Scheme and the Onboard Standards Accountability Program?
No, we haven't. We are monitoring those initiatives, but we have not yet reached a conclusion on how those could be supportive of our work, or we could be supportive of their work. I mean, those are specific to, as I understand it, in many cases, the social and labor and crew welfare kind of verification or reviews of those activities on board vessels. And so we, again, as I noted at the outset, that we are monitoring the growing number of initiatives and standards, and then we will be considering how ISSF can support them. But at this point, we do not have a specific direction in that regard.
Got a follow-up question there, Holly. What are your thoughts on the potential for duplication with those initiatives and others, and the work that ISSF is doing?
Well, that's exactly why we're monitoring them and we'll be looking very strategically at how ISSF could be supportive of those initiatives in some way. We are not interested, we don't have the expertise, it's not part of our strategic plan to become in any way a social or labor and, active in that space, developing standards or verification initiatives or those sorts of things. We would want to look at how we could support those, but not duplicate them.
Thank you. Any further questions at all? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much for joining our webinar, and special thanks for Holly for presenting twice. So that's fantastic. Yes. If you do have any questions or feedback, please feel free to pass them on to me. I speak to Holly regularly, so I'm sure we can, communicate on that and get any answers to questions and send them back to you. We don't have another webinar scheduled. We are looking to schedule one on the Cape Town Agreement, which you may have heard, you may be interested in. So I will be circulating information on that one, but we don't have a date for it as of yet. So for those of you who have joined us on this long journey since January, it's been an incredible series of webinars we've had so far with some wonderful speakers with a lot of information. So I would just say a final thank you for joining us, and a special thank you to Holly for bearing with us on 2 occasions, and I will be in touch with details on the Cape Town Agreement. The slides will be uploaded and on our new posh YouTube channel, and there will private YouTube channel, and there will also the slides will be uploaded as well. So thanks very much everyone for joining us, and
Thank you, Tom.
yeah, you're very welcome, and I'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you, everyone.